We're pleased to welcome back Ed Richardson, Executive Director, New Jersey Education Association, otherwise known as the NJEA, to disclose a longtime supporter of New Jersey NJTV News, as well as our broadcast. Ed, real quick, as we do this program, in the spring of 2018, the issue of school violence, huge issue.
Huge
issue.
The
president put on the table the whole question of teachers being armed, you say?
Absolutely not. And it's the last thing that our members want, or anyone else in the school community for that matter. I never thought I would say this, but I agree with the president of the National Rifle Association, who said you couldn't possibly train educators enough, nor would they be predisposed in a situation like the Parkland situation to actually fire at a student. It's just the wrong answer. And
what about, sorry for interrupting, what about some of your members who say, you know what, I own a gun legally, of course, and I want to do it? Should it be?
No. I mean, come on. Imagine yourself in that situation, and the real armed professionals do show up and address the situation. Who's the bad guy? How do you figure that out? Because you have multiple people in a school.
The president has oversimplified it?
Very much. Very much. We need sensible gun control, gun legislation. I know the state is looking at that. The federal government is looking at that. Republican congressmen are talking about that. So let's have that conversation. But then let's also look at things that we need to do to better secure our schools, to deal with potential mental health problems, including among our students, and make sure that they have the right resources available to them to help them.
Let's talk economics. Shifting gears, no real good segue. And we just hope and pray that our students and our teachers who help our students every day remain safe. So the biggest change from the last administration, you may have remembered Chris Christie as governor and his relationship with the NJEA.
Hard to forget.
And the relatively new governor, Phil Murphy. Biggest difference is?
Attitude, approach, respect. You know, Governor Murphy has said from the beginning throughout the campaign and the transition, and even just this morning I heard him speak at an event, and he said, we are not always going to agree on everything, but we will always have respectful dialogue. You will always be part of the dialogue. We didn't have that with Governor Christie.
So on the issue of public employee pensions, I don't know if it's the number is $80 billion unfunded liability. I have no idea what it even means. I just know that there's a hole, big hole.
Yeah.
What do you think the appropriate, out of a $35 billion state budget, what do you think the appropriate number is? And again, the budget will be out. We're doing this literally a couple days before, in March of 18. What do you think of that $35 billion, the right number is of state dollars to the public employee pension fund?
I have to, don't hold me to it, so I have to really look at where we are. But it's probably in the $3 billion range.
How much would that help, Ed?
It would help a lot, and here's why. For all of his failings, you know, Governor Christie had agreed to a 7-year ramp-up of funding, abandoned that 2 years in.
But he did, in fact,
finish the sentence. Yeah, let me finish the sentence. He did, in fact, try to get back on track with a now new 10-year ramp-up. So we believe that if we continue on that 10-year ramp-up, we're going to get there. And the funds will not default, that the benefits promised to public employees across the state will be secured. And this is extremely important because it's not just about funding the pensions. The state Supreme Court, in numerous challenges regarding the state funding, has said, unfortunately, from our perspective, no, the state can get away with not necessarily meeting its obligation, but they cannot walk away from the promised benefit. So imagine if the funds were to go run dry. The state would be on the hook as a general operating expense for all of those pensions. We can never get there.
Before we move to state funding in public schools, fully funding public schools, we've had some people on who said, you know what, we need to go back to the bargaining table with public employees and change the health care benefits that they get right now. We just can't afford it anymore. Could at a certain point can't anymore, you say?
Bargaining is the key, but bargaining got completely upended when the state passed a law in 2011 mandating premium shares on public employees. Yeah, this happened in 2011. All public employees were suddenly required by statute to pay up to 35% of the cost of their health care. And that was completely apart from whatever was negotiated at the collective bargaining table. Now, the law has, quote, sunsetted. It doesn't mean that those premiums go back to where they were before.
Right.
It means that you can now bargain that benefit back. We would argue that some reset is needed in the law, because what's happening is year over year, our members, public employees and other employment are taking home less pay year over year over year. We're starting to see that affect our schools.
Could we potentially lose really good teachers?
Absolutely, we already are. It's very typical, obviously, to see people who've worked their entire career, they reach retirement eligibility and start to look at that. People early in their career, there's attrition because they get a few years in, they say, this wasn't really for me. We're starting to see attrition at mid-career that we have never seen before.
Losing good teachers.
That is losing good, experienced educators.
A couple minutes left. Ed, give me another issue I've not raised that really matters, not just to the NJEA, but to all of the citizens of the state when it comes to education.
You mentioned school funding.
Yeah.
And,
the governor wants to fully fund the state formula for public schools.
And he should. I don't know that he's going to get there in year one. But Chris Christie level funded our public schools for 8 years.
What does that mean?
It means that there
increase?
was no increase, and so any dollar of new cost that a public school had to spend had to come from one of two places: cuts in programs and staff, or property tax increases. We
Were the
can't
property
sustain
taxes
that.
already too high?
Yes, and a lot of people forget that the school funding law, when it was adopted, funded by the state income tax, was known as the Property Tax Relief Fund. That is...
Oh, the irony.
Yeah, but think about that. If we begin fully funding our schools around the state, it takes some of that pressure off. Our property tax is going to go down all over the state? I doubt it. But at least the inertia for them to keep growing will not be there. And we'll be able to sustain our schools, fund our programs, deal with places where enrollment has grown, where they've not gotten another dollar over 8 years. Yeah.
What do you mean, haven't it?
We have districts all over the state where over the last 8 years, their enrollment has gone up, but their state aid has been flat.
But hold on.
I know, it's crazy.
Well, hold on.
It's crazy.
Isn't the increase in the number of students, don't you say, okay, now they're going to get more state aid? I'm confused by that.
If we fund the formula and use the formula, yes, that would happen. The way it's happened over the last 8 years, no. If you got $1 million in state aid last year, you got $1 million in
Even if
state
we're
aid
providing more services,
Even if you
requires
had-
more teachers, we have more students.
The only difference accounted for in there was some difference in special ed enrollment, because those are, sort of outlier costs. But no, our school districts around the state are in really rough shape, and we need to fully fund them.
30 seconds left. How confident are you that the Democrats in the legislature who control both houses and the governor will be able to work together in a meaningful way as it relates to solving our educational problems?
I'm actually very confident. I mean, there are three, as you said, Democratic leaders, the governor, the Senate President, the Assembly Speaker. They are all confronted with the same realities. They all very much want to deal with the issues in front of them, and I think they'll work together ultimately. I
say this every time you're on with it, I'll say it again. Say thank you to all of the public school teachers who help and teach and care for our students in the public schools every day. Thank you, Ed.
We appreciate it.
Well
Thanks,
done.
Steve.
That's it for this. See, I'm reading the prompter. That's it for this edition of State of Affairs, and we'll continue the conversation. Follow me at Twitter at Steve Adubato. We'll see you next time from the Agnes Varus studio here at NJTV. Catch you next time.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Agnes Varus NJTV studio at 2 Gateway. Funding has been provided by International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825, Guarini Institute, NJM Insurance Group, Fedway Associates, New Jersey Sharing Network, Wells Fargo, NJ Best, and by these public-spirited organizations, individuals, and associations committed to informing New Jersey citizens about the important issues facing the Garden State, and by Employers Association of New Jersey.